movies, TV shows, and impending starvation.
Certain death.
Senselessly waste the gift of life with these bozo cucks. Check for traps in lockdown.
This is the Check for Traps podcast in the bunker lockdown phase. I'm Josh.
I'm Aaron.
I'm Alec.
I'm Ruben.
That was fucking seamless.
I felt like I said my I'm Ruben weird, so I'm going to do it again. I'm Ruben. That's better. I have a thing about saying my own name. It always sounds
I'm
like
Boris Yeltsin.
I am Igor Karlov.
Hello, I'm Mr. Likes to Piss and Fuck.
I will put it all in.
I'm Mrs. Piss and Fuck.
Ruben's just wearing a dress.
Oh, man.
Likes to Piss and Fuck is hyphenated. I'm just Mrs. Piss and Fuck. He's Mr. Likes to hyphen Piss and Fuck.
It was a destined marriage.
And today, continuing our topical Plague Armageddon movies, we watched Doomsday, a movie that some of us vaguely remembered seeing as sweaty teenagers, and also remembered being a lot better than it actually turned out to be. It's about a plague breaks out in Scotland, and we immediately jump at the opportunity to wall them in like dogs. And I wanted to ask you guys a quick logistical question about this. So the movie opens, and the virus has spread throughout thousands of people within less than 1 week, and then that's when the movie opens, and we've already reconstructed a completely up-to-date, state-of-the-art version of Hadrian's Wall along the line where Hadrian's Wall was in 7 days or less, which would suggest to me that this was a plan that we had in waiting and actually couldn't wait for an excuse to employ. What are you thinking?
I think right after the Tories finished HS2, this was like the next one. This is the next big infrastructure project in the UK. That film, so I remember this film from like Film 4, probably like in maybe 2010 or something, and all I remembered was helicopter gunships into a big wall. I don't remember any of the Mad Max stuff, and then I just remember the knights. So I actually had remembered this film as Knights versus Helicopters, and I had clearly manufactured a catapult launching a boulder at a helicopter and felling it, which doesn't happen in the film, which I've lied to a lot of people about over the years, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah, when you were talking about it, you did imply there was some sort of medieval knight. Well, I think you said knights, and implied that he'd be in it a lot more than he was really only in it for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, so what I remember, Alec, is a film where medieval knights engage sort of like SWAT guys on the background of a zombie outbreak, which isn't what this film is about.
No. I mean, there are all those things individually.
To build on what you're saying about how you kind of like swatched some stuff over that did happen with some stuff that didn't happen, I was remembering a scene where they engaged the knights on like a stairwell or something, again against like a zombie backdrop, but I was thinking in like a castle stairwell, and now I've realised that I was just thinking of the scene in 28 Days Later where Brendan Gleeson comes down the stairs in the block of flats in SWAT gear, and then the fact that there's knights in this. So I've also knitted this together with a bunch of other shit.
Yeah, clearly. Because the image of like a catapult striking a helicopter has always been like really high up in my list of visual memories that clearly don't actually exist.
See, my only prior engagement with this, or even really knowledge of the film, was that it was constantly in the cheap DVD section of the Sainsbury's in Whirl that I used to work next to. In my sixth form years and years between going to university, I would often go into that Sainsbury's and look for a cheap DVD, and always passed up Doomsday because I thought this looks like bollocks.
Yeah,
I'd never even heard of it. Like until you guys messaged earlier on and were like, "We're watching Doomsday." So my first experience of it was when we watched it today. I didn't look anything up, and it was a real fucking treat.
Yeah,
Thanks very much for that. I tell you what, I was not bored at one moment. However, I was not impressed at one moment either.
I find it weird that my like jumbled teenage brain actually created a more coherent film than the film that was on screen, which is pretty mad.
I would have loved to see a catapult destroy a helicopter. A trebuchet would have been even better.
You're getting mixed up with the Planet of the Apes, where the monkey just jumps into a helicopter.
No, but that's sick as well. Because that came out way later. Like I would have a clear distinction of those. Like I've been trying to find this film since before the first Planet of the Apes film came out.
Do they fire a monkey out of a catapult?
The monkey fires himself out of a monkey pult, by which I mean he jumps.
Monkey pult?
Yeah. A guy did the maths about the amount of helicopters we have and the amount of that type of gorilla that exists, and there isn't enough gorillas to down all the helicopters required, which is quite depressing.
That's really sad.
Yeah, I think like the maths of Planet of the Apes is that even if all the monkeys in the world became super intelligent, we still outnumber them by the order of millions.
Yeah.
There are not very many apes left because
Because
we've
done a
killed
good
them all.
fucking job. Yeah, exactly.
Much like the Scots in 2008's Doomsday.
Yeah, how many Scots are there? I was thinking about this. Did they quarantine a nation of about 6 million? Would it be roughly?
I think they also dumped... Actually, I don't know. Did they
Newcastle-
dump English
Newcastle's
people
in
in there
there.
as well? Or did they...
Yeah, they must have done
I'm
because
pretty sure everyone in Scotland is in this film. There are so many extras.
No, because there's so the castle, the border shows Newcastle as well. So yeah, they definitely like locked off a good portion of the UK as well. You're right.
It's a hard film to summarise, though, isn't it?
Nah.
Because so much happens.
It's just, they put up the wall to keep out the Scots because of plague. 30 years pass. They realised that they left their top scientist who was working on the cure behind the wall. They didn't have time to extract him, but they did have time to build the wall. And then it's time to send in one-eyed matey like Mrs. Potato Head and a crack team of people. And also a doctor whose relevance I cannot fully remember, although they said it was important not to lose him. Although they did lose him and it didn't affect the plot. When they get back, when they get behind the wall, everyone's turned into punk rock cannibals with a baffling access to supplies of like refined oil for petrol and hair dye for punk rock hair.
Hair dye and fetish gear was
Loads of
something I
fetish
thought
gear.
would be a much stricter supply in the post-apocalypse, but
So much fat gear.
apparently not.
Those mohawks are impeccably well maintained as well. I think it must be a very hard hair lifestyle to maintain, but they've got it down.
Yeah,
I mean, they literally eat people. That's how bad things have got, but they have all of these other luxuries, including, perfectly fitting gimp suits, unless they just got really lucky with the one they found. Or maybe someone builds that stuff in the Scottish post-apocalypse. I don't know.
Well,
Artisan.
Wicked sound system as well. They're putting on these crazy concerts every night.
I thought it was brave of the film to show a utopian version of Glasgow, which is infinitely superior to the current one.
oh, there was so many potential for Glasgow jokes. Like, there's a bit where there's like that Glasgow sign. It just says like "fuck off" written on it. And I'm like, that's just the actual sign. It's the same with like the "Welcome to Glasgow" bit. It's like that sign doesn't exist. They had to make that.
I also really enjoyed the scene where they just went fully documentary guerrilla and they shot the actual Glaswegian bus connection just chasing the car around the street.
It's because the car looked at the bus driver funny.
Glasgow jokes are a classic. I think Glasgow's fine now. I think
I
it's
think the
good.
problem with I said this when I went to Glasgow for the first time. I said I think Glasgow would be like considered a perfectly fine city if it wasn't next to Edinburgh.
My abiding memory of Glasgow will be when I was doing my psychology A level, and there was a map of the country, and it was the deeper purple the area was, the higher instance of mental illness there was, and Glasgow was nearly black. That's my abiding
So, yeah, when
memory.
you said that, I thought that you had been to Glasgow for your A-level psychology, and I was like, Jesus, what sort of...
Yeah, we went on safari.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, what sort of fucking like voyage through the unknown was that?
Taking poverty porn to the logical conclusion of just shipping out middle-class country children to
Look at them. Look at all the heroin they
look at these
do.
beasts.
Look what we
Really
did to this
enjoyed how
area.
many film references there were in this film to other films.
Can't believe I forgot like that was the whole point of the film almost. Like it felt like everything from like the 70s up to probably like the day before this got closed shooting. It was mad.
Yeah, I think the main character is Major Eden's second name, Norman or something. I can't remember. And she's got one eye, just like Snake Plissken from Escape from New York. There's a heavily armored two heavily armored APCs with Marines drive around a ruined facility while doing chatter, just like aliens, fighting off a horde of melee weapon wielding savages. A dude gets Boromired to death.
Gimp, like in Pulp Fiction.
There's a really weird one where the main character loses her eye as a child from being shot or something.
Yeah, I think so. Like debris or something, or like shrapnel. I
Yeah.
got no idea.
And there's some like tenuous link with that to Dog Soldiers, where the character in that is there's a link between the actress playing her mother lost an eye in Dog Soldiers or something like that.
Well, the Dog Soldiers that Neil Marshall also directed.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Oh, is it the same guy did Dog Soldiers?
Yeah.
No
Yeah,
way.
and that's why Sean
Oh, man,
Pertwee
what a film.
dies by being cooked, because he dies of being on fire in Dog Soldiers.
Oh.
The whole film is basically just him remaking Dog Soldiers.
The whole film is just like a weird ass series of references. Like it's like really 28 Days Later-ish. There's like so much Mad Max apocalypse stuff. You know,
It does seem like they've just plagiarized absolutely everyone they possibly
It's not plagiarism, it's homage.
Homage, yeah, exactly.
Homage.
Like,
Aaron, you mentioned remembering it vaguely and not really remembering the plot, and I also was like, oh, I look forward to seeing that movie because I remember that Scotland is in lockdown, but I don't really remember what happens and why. And by the time we were about like a couple of minutes from the end of this movie, I was like, well, I still don't really know what the plot was, and I also gave up caring quite a long time ago.
Yeah, I did. I actually consoled myself with this maybe 30 minutes ago, where I was like, the reason you didn't grab onto the plot, Aaron, is because there wasn't an over amount. Because I agree with you. At the end, I was like, oh, she does have the cure. Sick.
Reaper virus emerges in Glasgow. It turns you into a big horrible zombie like 28 days later. Government eventually just seals off Scotland, and after attempting to quarantine them properly, just seals them in and shoots them all. And then 20 years later, the virus has re-emerged, and the only place they can think of that might have a cure is this doctor that refused to come out. So they send a team in to go and look for this cure. Biddly. Stuff happens. Malcolm McDowell, they go out a hustle.
Yeah, didn't you think
look, it's Bob Hoskins.
Malcolm McDowell was being very sort of like General Curtsy in like his weird medieval kingdom.
Malcolm McDowell was having a great time.
Yeah, apparently Neil Marshall tried to get Sean Connery for the role. He wanted him to be like the lone Scottish researcher trying to save the world, I think.
I'm never going back to Scotland. That's why Sean Connery wouldn't do it. It's like, I'm not going back
now.
Can't make me.
I'm just patiently waiting for more Alec doing Sean Connery impressions. Someone set him up again.
Just try and bait him out of different Sean Connery films.
Alec, how would he have behaved in that role?
Well, we just won't know. That's the problem. He's so retired. But
so retired.
He's so supremely retired.
I was going to say, would you say this film is better or worse than Bright?
The jury's still out. I wish it was a little bit more like Bright, though. Stop making me a meme.
That's a good meme.
I'm a real human being with thoughts.
Real human meme.
And a real lolcat.
No, that's fine. I'll take being a lolcat. The venerable elder statesman of memes.
So, Josh, I was hinting to you earlier that Scotland had fucked up in this film because
classic Scotch fuck up. I cannot wait.
Scotland's tourism agency, Visit Scotland, gave this film a cool 300 big ones to prop this up because they thought it would be a positive marketing and tourism message for the rest of the world to Scotland. There must not have been much going on.
Scotland is a plague-ridden shithole.
Well, indeed.
Only because of the British.
Yeah, so the SNP was like, well, the quote was ridiculous. It was, our country and our party is like continually aiming for Scotland to think about being independent, but this film depicts us as London's like bitch that just gets quarantined instantly and is able to rule us empirically.
The good old SNP really doing to work to deflate the stereotype of the Scottish as dour, humourless proddies.
There was apparently like quite a lot of like contention. But the best thing is that like Neil Marshall and like the guys behind the Doomsday's sort of award campaign pushed for it to, even though it wasn't nominated for as Scotland's BAFTA, because apparently Scotland gets a BAFTA nomination. They campaigned for it, but it wasn't even mentioned by the jury after like loads of campaigning.
Ooh, cowards.
What do you think they told, what version of the story did they feed to the tourism board to make them issue the check? I mean, the obvious answer is they said nothing and the Scottish Tourism Board just threw some stolen taxpayer money at them.
I reckon, yeah, so I was about to say, this is sort of like, this feels like one of the like poster childs for your rampant arts and culture spending. Like the fact that like, several people's yearly salaries went on.
Give it to Doomsday, and then they complained about the product they got, which can only have been exactly the one that was described on the tin.
I reckon what they told Visit Scotland was they said that it is a film that focuses on the resilient nature of the Scottish people in a time of hardship and Scotland's natural beauty, though obviously while being majoritively filmed in South Africa.
And its enduring respect for punk rock culture, and they also told them probably that the Scottish invaded the English at the end and won.
How much do you reckon Alexander Siddig got paid per scene?
Yeah, right.
His
like price per line must be astronomical.
I mean, I don't think he's that big.
Insane.
I think the most expensive people in it would have been Bob Hoskins and Malcolm McDowell.
The girl probably as well.
No, I just meant with how little like Alexander Siddig was in it was ridiculous. Like I was like, man, his suicide would have a lot more pathos or anything to me if he'd been developed as a character.
I think she was in Underworld after this, wasn't she?
She was only in the sequels as well. She wasn't in the first.
Yeah,
one.
She replaced somebody from the first one.
Yeah.
Kate Beckinsale.
Bill Nighy. They really wanted to sex up Bill Nighy.
Can you imagine Bill Nighy in that little leather outfit?
She was the live action model for Lara Croft in the late 90s. Yeah, when they do a poster and they wanted a some of the ones whose breasts weren't triangular.
Little known trivia fact about this film, actually. Bill Nye cameos in this film as the Gimp.
As the-
You just never see his face.
he then released a novelty single about it, just like Love Actually. Gimps are all around me.
What did you
So my boner grows.
I mean, it's a genre film, and I guess the sort of actors that would love to do a little sort of genre British film, even though it's shot in South Africa. And like Bob Hoskins was not an easy get. I know Malcolm McDowell's been doing this sort of thing for years, but it's still Malcolm McDowell.
I think the film's got a surprisingly high production value. Like, we were really complimenting like the 2008 CGI and like special effects. Like,
Yeah, the special effects are really good. The gore and stuff is like, it looks really realistic. And when they burn that guy as well, it's quite visceral.
Sean Pertwee. You know the APCs that they drive about in? They built those themselves
that's fantastic.
because they found out
Christ.
it would have been cheaper than buying a similar vehicle. They're like, fuck it, we'll just build ones. And they were functioning, and they had armor plating and bulletproof glass and stuff.
Didn't have crossbow-proof glass though.
No,
Yeah.
that was.
Well, that
I
has
think the
that
windows broke somehow because there's a bit where where the guy is showing off his sexy machine, and he goes, "Oh, this can deflect anything from chemical weapons to 30mm cannon fire," and then a crossbow bolt kills one of the drivers by going through a broken window. Like, are the Scottish more powerful than 30mm cannons? Is that why the tourism board were so up for it? They're like, we will portray your people as able to overcome even the most advanced English invader
Harder.
with a
Obviously,
stick. So they're running about in ruined Glasgow, and I do think it's a shame that the first one to go gets decked by like a baseball bat with knives stuck.
One of my big criticisms was that, like, they did that thing in Aliens, but they did it wrong in pacing, where you introduce a sick group of characters and you should watch them get killed off one by one over the course of the film. But because this film had so much ground to cover, it had to kill them off one by one over the course of a 10-minute scene, which wasn't nearly as satisfying. Because I was loving the two APC drivers. I like how he dies. I like that he dies with such malice, like fucking throws a grenade at the woman who killed him. Like,
That was absolutely glorious. Could you imagine, like, a normal person would be like, even a combat trained person would be like, well, this is it, I'm mortally wounded, time to make peace with the fact I'm going to die. No, he was like, no time for those thoughts. Unpin grenade, throw into the back seat, lands completely between her legs. He's like, good shot, yes, die happy.
on brand till the last moment.
I just think that like the whole film was just such a it's just a fun exercise in excess, and they've got their stage show that they put on where they play like Adam and the Ants for some reason, and they all come out dressed as Highlanders and do a little dance, and then throw out like camping plates to the crowd so they can cook and eat Sean Pertwee.
One thing about Doomsday, I guess, that you all said that it's like a hodgepodge fan collage of things that he obviously likes. One thing that I rate about it is it obviously lends, or rather like takes a lot from Mad Max, but it has also like seemed to have lent something to the future Mad Max Fury Road, because this has the Gimp who's tied as like a hood ornament to the front of a car, and then I don't remember that from the original Mad Max movies, but that is one of the main parts of the Warboy go-karts in Mad Max Fury Road. So congratulations, director of this movie, you accidentally inspired someone else.
Well, I was going to say, accidentally inspired someone who in turn inspired him. Do you reckon it's some sort of glorious cultural exchange?
Beautiful.
Ruben, best and worst moment.
My favourite moment was, without a doubt, when they're on the train platform and the crazy guy punches his buddy in the nose out of nowhere. Made me laugh. Also, little trivia fact, he broke his nose doing that, the stuntman.
Wow.
Smacked him right in the face.
That seems like
broke his
such an
nose.
avoidable stunt to not break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did 2 takes as well, so he got punched in the face twice. And the second take, he broke his nose. Worst moment. It's hard to say because, like, all of it is shit, but also it's really entertaining at the same time. I don't really have a worst moment.
That's a good sign. That's a really good
I
sign.
rate that.
Joshua.
I'll go in reverse order. Worst moment was the slow realization that there was not going to be as much night action as I remembered there being. That's definitely the worst moment.
They
by
did
far.
the night when we were like an hour and the knights hadn't showed up. I was like, I have critically misremembered this film.
It was just the realization when they were like hanging out in the castle and stuff. I was like, I remember this being rad, but it's actually one of the weaker parts of the movie. But the best bit by far was when the convoy of like evil punk rock cannibals showed up at the end. and Sol had his dead girlfriend's corpse propped up in the seat with the head taped back on. That was fucking brutal. That was heavy metal, man. I loved it.
I liked how annoyed he got when she got shot, even though it was literally inconsequential. Alec, what was yours?
I think I liked quite a lot about it. I quite enjoyed this. I liked the sort of Aliens-esque shooty bit. I liked the opening. I thought it was a bit exposition heavy, but I quite enjoyed myself. I really liked the actor whose name I remember now forgotten, playing Carician, the baddie, the bad politician. I liked his voice and just how evil and how ominous he was. I really liked the car chase scene at the end. I thought that was fun. I liked Adrian Lester. I thought he was good in this.
Is he the man from Hustle?
He is the man from Hustle. Didn't like how underused Bob Hoskins was, because I love Bob Hoskins, and he was proper Diamond Geezer full force mode in this.
I bet they only had him on set for like 2 days.
And he just sort of does a bit of mentoring and shoots a Zombo in the face. And I was like, he definitely could have wandered about with his big old shooter.
You could tell that every scene he was in didn't require him to go to South Africa as well. Like, he definitely never left the UK to do this.
Do you reckon that's how they managed to afford him then, by saying, we're only going to need you for... In London, it's only going to take 6 hours.
It's really good.
Bob, do you want to come out to South Africa? I'm not fucking leaving Watford.
Don't be fucking
ever again.
Sounds a little bit fruity.
Well, it's like we were talking about this, and the government and the military seem to have assembled the entire squad pretty well. It seems pretty incidental that Bob Hoskins is asked to provide our main character for this squad.
She's like a police officer, isn't she? Some sort of mad...
Yeah, DDS, Department of Domestic Security.
Yeah,
I like
mad
dirty dog
cyborg
soldiers
cop, and he's just a guy with a really big gun.
Which apparently in this like very incompetent government is the mark of a police chief.
Do you think if they just sort of like corralled Bob Hoskins on the way out of the pub and promised him that they would buy him a whole night's worth of rounds the next day if he would sit on the step outside and do some fatherly exposition with someone in their movie, and he agreed to it?
Just shove a gun in his hand. He's just
get a couple of pints on the counter for me.
He's like, this is a fake gun, give me a real one.
I don't act if it's not loaded. That's how it works.
Your character isn't armed. Yes, he is.
Hoskins is always armed. Are you speaking about yourself in the third person? Hoskins says yes.
If Hoskins was in 2035, he'd be armed. It's like he's weirdly weirdly up on the details of the plot, despite being completely hammered.
Hoskins was armed at his granddaughter's birthday party, so he's definitely armed in the zombie Scottish future.
Do you reckon he filmed the video for Sheila by Jamie T during this, as in between takes? He'd just bobble off down to the Thames and do some lip syncing. He's like, well, I'm in the area.
He was making bank that week.
Making bank and drinking every single day.
Bob.
My favourite bit was probably, I really enjoyed the APC bit. I don't think that lasted long enough. I thought that was fantastic. And yeah, like Alec, sort of like that entire opening SWAT thing, operation thing was fantastic. I would have watched a lot more, the film being a lot more of that, watching them contest sort of like the people. Saw an interesting Easter egg just quickly, that apparently there is a baseball fury in that mob. Like, someone is actually just dressed up as a baseball fury, which I thought was a sick little Easter egg.
Nice.
Least favourite moment was probably the shit sword fight between main hero and Sol's girlfriend.
Oh, you didn't like the sexy lady sword fight?
No, which is because I have quite a high standard of sexy lady sword fights. It's a very important part of my life, and so when there's a shit sexy lady sword fight, I get really annoyed. The really terrible editing, like Ruben said, like the incredibly quick cutting
the cuts.
on
the
thing made it seem like that fight had actually been, it was like a really cool idea, but then on the day it just didn't really work, and they were like, we'll just fucking composite what we've got and call it a day. Because it could have
second or something.
It could have been a sick fight, because I really like that main character.
The Bentley they're in.
Yeah.
Bentley doesn't do product placement, so they wouldn't give them one.
Right.
So they bought 3 of them for like 150 grand. So we know where that...
I was about to say
tourism money went.
Visit Scotland just bought 2 Bentleys.
And then one of them they used for all the stunt work, and it only needed like a repainting. It was really durable. The second one, they accidentally drove into a gorge.
Fucking idiots. I'd be so furious with that guy.
Accidentally driving a £150,000 supercar into a gorge.
You've had shit days of work, right? The next time anyone gets a shit day of work, just imagine being the guy who drove the Bentley off on Doomsday.
Some random little... I bet he wasn't the best boy grip, was he?
Yeah, he didn't have a good grip of that steering wheel. this isn't a film that can really afford to lose a a car like that. I mean, the budget's only like 20 mil or something, isn't it?
I mean, an alternative idea was they'd bought the 3 Bentleys, realised they didn't need all 3 of them, and could sell one back with minimal effort. We'll just have to do a cosmetic refit on the other one. Do you want to drive the other one into a gorge? And they were like, yes. So, will it make it into the film? Depends if you remember to turn the cameras on. Oh, we didn't. Whoops.
That reminds me of Chan Who Am I scene where they only had one car that they had to plummet off. I think it was a dam, wasn't it? And they were like, if we fail this, the film is cancelled.
Oh, so not if we drop Jackie Chan off a dam. They weren't bothered.
Jackie Chan loves getting his shit fucked up, mate. He's broken like every bone in his body on set. He loves being like dragged through like electrical wiring that's like sparking. He's got like a plastic cap in his skull from where he jumped into a tree in Armour of God, fell out of it, smashed his skull, almost died on the set of like 2 Police Stories.
He's like Tom Cruise, but if Tom Cruise had been subject to like the health and safety of 70s Asia instead of the United States.
Yeah, because while Tom Cruise learnt to fly a jet for the Top Gun sequel, Jackie Chan would have just been required to follow a post-it note.
Get hit by the jet.
Whenever we like watch something like this, I always get this weird creeping suspicion that we're the people who most recently watched it by a margin of like several years. And I imagine that Alex, like Sainsbury's used copy of this, is still sitting gathering dust on that shelf.
Probably still in that section.
Well, shout out to the Key Grip and the Best Boy Grip. We've been checked for traps. See you later.
Wash your hands.
Remember to thank your
Wash
grips.
your fucking hands.
Or you'll end up in Scotland, or even worse, Glasgow.